Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Joining me, as always, is Mike. Mike, how you doing, sir?
Doing good. How about you, Reed?
I'm doing good, but we're here today to talk a video that I wish we weren't making, but one I think that I kind of just want to toss it out there and see what people's thoughts are. Um, Mike, you and I love a lot of comic book characters. Your favorite Flash, mine's Batman. You and I, as DC fans, also have Marvel characters we love. Yours in the Marvel realm is Thor. Mine has
Right.
been this guy, Wolverine. And
Yes.
other than the cool J. Scott Campbell cover that you get there, this issue, number 12, not very good. Now, some of this I could say is solid Anamit, who I did like Justice League Red that he just released, but his Daredevil run struggled, and Wolverine has struggled. So he's writing my two favorite Marvel characters. Apparently, both of them have not great comics.
Mm,
But this is not a solid Anamit issue. I think Wolverine has been not ruined, but really negatively affected in the last 10 years of comic books. Movies, they've done a good job with them. I do think there's some problems there that we'll touch in this video as well in his portrayal on screen. Um, but here's the premise that I'll kick to you, Mike. Wolverine is where I'll take it, but you can go into other characters that fit this mold for you too. What made him great character? He was an edgy kind of a jerk. He drank too much, he smoked too much, he was too prone to violence, he had the berserker rage, and Wolverine didn't really care if people liked him. He loved the X-Men. I think one thing I'll give Hugh Jackman, I loved that scene in Deadpool and Wolverine where he's like, I spent so much time pretending I didn't want to be there, I couldn't have them thinking I cared, kind of thing.
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that's Wolverine. He is a flawed individual, and I think he perfectly captures what an anti-hero is. Well, Batman sometimes gets called an anti-hero. He's not. He's a hero who's dark. Wolverine, where I always loved him as a character, he was unpredictable. If Wolverine and Captain America were in the same comic, there was a 50% chance they were going to help each other, and there was a
Yeah.
50% chance they were going to fight each other. Wolverine would go after the bad guy, and he's probably going to kill the bad guy because he can't control his instincts.
Yeah.
Or the X-Men would have a solid plan, and Wolverine would screw it up because he can't control his berserker rage. I think the animated series did a great job of this. There was, I think, first issue, even our first episode, Beast gets captured, Cyclops wants to formulate a plan, and Wolverine's like, "Screw that, we're going now." I
Yeah.
think the character, what he made him so cool was they risked making the audience not like him at times. Sometimes he was a little too aggressive and flirting with Jean Grey in front of Cyclops, where you're like, that's kind of a jerk move, but it worked for the character. It made him unique. I think they have done way too much, especially, and we'll touch on this in a bit here, giving him a definitive origin, making him an Avenger, trying to make him fit the traditional hero instead of the gruff anti-hero kind of jerk that you still loved. To me, that's hurt him a lot. Mike, I know you're not as big a Wolverine guy, but what do you think about what they've done with the character overall?
Well, I think, like you said, Wolverine always was the wild card in the story, and that's brilliant because you need that kind of unpredictable thing in there to help spice up the story. It makes for good storytelling. Not everybody has to be, the Adam West Boy Scout Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've gotten to a place where well, hopefully we're getting out of this, but where you're trying to make the good guys anti-heroes and dark, and you're trying to make the anti-heroes good guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just weird, like with the X-Men, it's really weird. Like, to make the bad guys good guys and the good guys bad guys. It just seems like, yeah, trying to make something different, but different isn't always better.
Yeah, I think where Wolverine has been uniquely affected by comic books, and I'll touch on this a bit because I know people go too far with this stuff, but there's the best word for it's probably political correctness. I may not be coming up with the best thing there, but there has been a tendency of we want to make sure Wolverine's a character who doesn't offend anybody anymore. And
That's his job, to offend everybody.
and I
He's
think the thing
completely
is
offensive.
what Wolverine, and I'm going to come up with an example. from a recent comic that was disastrous, not for any reason other than the writers going too far to make people supportive of it. They did a issue where Mystique got married to Destiny, and in the comic, Wolverine is trying to find a wedding gift for Mystique.
That's just so
And
like
there's other things
Wolverine
they
hates
throw in, like
Mystique.
Wolverine educating the kids on the history of treatment of peoples and things like that. And look, do I think Wolverine would give a crap that Mystique is wearing a woman? No. He'd look and go, I don't care who you marry. You do what you do, bub. Like, he's not going to care.
Bub.
But Wolverine is also not going to buy a gift from Mystique, who has been trying to kill him based on the past history of these two characters. They've either
Like
been hooking up with each other or trying to murder each other for
for
like a
like a
hundred
hundred
years in the
years.
comics.
Yeah, yeah,
Not going to the wedding with a gift and like, let me teach you kids about the importance of this. And it's that kind of stuff. Wolverine, they did an event called, I think it was with, where him and Cyclops broke the X-Men team in half. I liked the conflict between Wolverine and Cyclops, but they picked it like Cyclops was the one who wanted to train kids to be like child soldiers, and Wolverine was so offended by that that he broke up the X-Men. And again, I don't think Wolverine wants child soldiers to be around, but he's also not the character who's going to care that much that he's going to cause a civil war between him and the X-Men. And that's the problem they've had is Wolverine used to overly. There's a very famous panel in one of the X-Men comics where Jean Grey's dress is getting stuck underneath her and it's too long, and he just rips it for her. She's like, "Someone take care of this," and he rips it too far to make it short. And he's kind of being a jerk because she asked him to do something, but Wolverine was doing it in a jerky way that's a little overly flirtatious. But that's who he is. He's
yeah,
kind of the lovable scumbag that you
yeah.
root for. And there are people who hate Wolverine as a character for that. But I think that's what made him popular. Was you had to risk that Wolverine is going to tick off certain people, but there's going to be other people who love him, who go out. And I think what they've conflated, Mike, and this is where I think we do this too much in comics now. I understand that we want our heroes to reflect things that we culturally see as right now, right? So they have certain political issues or social issues they touch in comics, and they believe, hey, any character who is a hero has to believe in these things. I'm not against that on the whole. However, a character like Wolverine doesn't fit that. Wolverine should look at modern social things and kind of be more, I don't care, where's my next beer? That's Wolverine.
Yeah.
To me, them trying to, and I think, Mike, you can probably expand on this a little bit because we've had characters like the Punisher. You've been reading comics a long time. There has been these edgy characters that come in, and they always seem to want to sand them down a little bit too much. Do you think that's a major prevalent issue in comics? Like, how do you feel on when they tackle that kind of thing?
Well, you hurt the character. I mean, Wolverine's the prime example. That's why you love that character is you love to and you don't have to agree with Wolverine. You
Mm-hmm.
just understand that that's the character and it makes for an interesting story. Like, maybe you wouldn't go into berserker mode,
Yep.
when somebody cuts you off in traffic, but that's what Wolverine would do.
Yeah.
And and there's a certain kind of catharsis there of you reading that, it's kind of like why 2-year-olds love the Hulk.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, no, and I think that's a huge issue that you bring up is writers now seem to write these characters of like, and I think, I'll bring up another modern writer, but he's doing a little better with Batman right now. But Tom Taylor is a DC writer who I think does this all the time of, hey, I'm writing Nightwing. You know what will make Nightwing a hero? He believes everything I believe. And it's basically just Dick Grayson has now become Tom Taylor's mouthpiece for every issue, and he will reflect everything that he believes. I think what is lost in that, I bring up my second favorite fictional character of all time, James Bond. He's a British super spy who can walk into any room, hook up with any woman that he wants, and lives by excitement and danger and all this stuff. I
Yeah,
love the character. I'm a married guy who doesn't
yeah,
get any woman that I want in a bar, mainly because I'm a stably married guy with multiple kids who works a boring office job. You know
yeah.
why I like James Bond? Not because I can relate to James Bond in any way.
Right.
I love James Bond because it's an interesting freaking character. And
Yeah.
you look at it, the Conan's another one. You and I are not barbarians. You and I are not guys who get in bar fights. We're
Right.
comic book nerds who read comic books who probably way too old to do so. We love Conan, this savage, drinking, sword swinging barbarian who hooks up with a lot of women because it's an interesting story. And I
Yeah,
think
it's good.
that's part of what's happened is there's this desire now of we can't have Wolverine do that. He needs to be a little more what would a man from the 2020s do? We can't have this character do that. It's the same thing I think we do with the Punisher. There's always this tendency to want to
And
dive into the
Venom.
Punisher. Venom, another one. We've
Yeah.
taken the edge off to where Mary Jane is now Venom.
But go into the Punisher for a minute.
But
Yeah.
Mary Jane's Venom. God, that's hard to but the Punisher, right? There's this ability now with writers. We're like, oh, we can't just write the Punisher because he has guns and guns are real. And so we have to, it's like, guys, this is the Marvel universe. In a world where Thanos has a magic gauntlet that can snap away half of all life, a guy with a gun, not really the biggest issue that anyone's going to care about in the Marvel universe.
Right.
But when they write that character, it's like, well, in real life, this would be a scary character. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
all of them would be terrifying in real life.
Yeah.
Superman, one thing I'll give Zack Snyder with Superman, as much as he went off the rails with a lot of things, the world's reaction to a superpowered being who can float, shoot lasers from his eyes, freeze things with his breath, and lift up ships out of the ocean would be fear. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing is when you try too much to make Wolverine, Punisher, Venom, I think even, characters like Red Hood at DC, when you try too much to sand these characters down and go, we can't risk this person offending somebody, you ruin the characters, you take away what makes them special, and you might as well just be reading Spider-Man or Batman or Superman or some of these other characters because what made these ones unique was that edge. And again, you don't need to make them bad guys. You don't need to make Wolverine do unsavory, awful things. But you also don't need to like Wolverine's a teacher now. Like, what are we doing? I think it's just too far with it. Last thing we'll kind of touch into, Mike. I think this hurt the X-Men movies as well with Wolverine. As much as I love Jackman, the X-Men movies basically pushed Cyclops to the side. They acted like Cyclops didn't exist. And a lot of what they did is they amalgamated Cyclops and Wolverine into one character. And that Wolverine was the central figure. Wolverine and Jean's relationship was the main thing that drove everything. Wolverine was the reluctant leader, but the leader. I do think the on-screen presentation of Wolverine, especially the dumb decision to give him both in the movies and in the comics, a definitive origin story, which I think was one of the dumbest things they've ever done. Do you think the cinematic presentation of, as much as you and I both love Jackman, do you think that also hurt the character quite a bit and is why we're getting this version we're getting?
This stems from the whole problem where the movies should be the movies and the comics should be the comics. And
Mm-hmm.
try and put them together, but they never fit together quite right. When you have a great star like Hugh Jackman, you've got to do some writing around that and make that a central point of the movie. You can't. Um, but in the comics, Cyclops is the leader, and Cyclops is the greater character.
Mm-hmm.
And Wolverine is more of like an ancillary character who joins the team and then goes off and then joins back again and goes off. But when you had to bring it to the big screen, are you talking about the original X-Men movies, right?
Yeah, the original
Yeah,
five.
and then all the stuff where they delved into his backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, first of all, the mystery of Logan and the Wolverine were always part of the interesting part of comics. And of course, comics have a long format, decades. Eventually, you're going to get around to the
Mm-hmm.
origin story. Some writers say, I can tackle that
Yeah.
and give you that. I mean, that was just a given. It was going to happen eventually. But I must say it was quite savory to have that unknown that he didn't know and we didn't know, and it just is what it is.
Yep.
I think that played out for a long, long time. But I do think that the movies, they went the way they did because of Hugh Jackman and the strength of
Well,
the.
and I think the point you raised that makes for the movies it makes a lot of sense. For the movies it might be now I think you could have done a better job, but I think for the time, the 2000s, they looked at it as look, Wolverine's the most popular character. He sells the most action figures. Let's make him the central point. We need him to be the leader and the main narrative character. And so Cyclops, I think even to an extent, Storm and other characters all kind of got benched to make Logan. And look, as a Wolverine fan, I was fine with that. But like you said, it shouldn't be reflected in the comics because it's a different medium. It doesn't translate perfectly. I would say I hope Marvel can do a better job of balancing that later, but given what they've done lately, I don't know where my confidence is on that. I just think giving Wolverine a definitive origin was always, and it's part of why I've loved this Spider-Man and Wolverine series, where they're hinting his unreliable past he doesn't remember if he killed Peter Parker's parents who were spies or not. And I think that's a really cool way to use Logan's past. And I think it's cool to show the Weapon X origin. I think all of that. I think the mistake is when they did the comic book called Origin, and I think it was Jenkins who was the writer on that, where they went like he was born at this time and his parents were this, and you gave him all the definitive things. He was always this cool man of mystery of like Wolverine could meet somebody from like the 1700s and like he technically could have been involved in that. And I think that was really cool when they did that. I think the other piece is we need with comic books, everybody has the definitive origin. That was what made Logan unique. In the same way that the Joker's a unique character. I hate when they attempt to give the Joker an origin. And that's one of the greatest things of the character is the ultimate detective Batman cannot unravel the mystery of his greatest enemy's actual origin, and it's where The Dark Knight did such a brilliant job with Ledger, giving the multiple different stories of like he was
Mhm.
an abused child, or he carved his face because of his wife getting carved up by gamblers, and though that was a brilliant part of it. It would have been as dumb as if in that movie the Joker would have eventually been like, "Well, here's my actual origin," like it would have ruined the whole thing. And I think that's a little bit of what's been taken from Logan is that there's efforts now to make sure these characters don't offend anybody. And Wolverine is a character that you have to risk offending some of the audience. That's what makes him popular. He shouldn't be the straight-laced hero. And I
Do you
think part of
think?
this
Do you
relates to him
think?
being an Avenger and stuff like that. It never should have happened. Go ahead, Mike.
Do you think it's because Disney now owns him that they need to get him ready for the kiddie ride at Disney
I,
World?
I would say
Or
yes, but what's weird is like the animated series in the 90s captured better than the comics are doing. And obviously, he was sanitized. He wasn't beheading people and stuff like that in the 90s cartoon because you couldn't have done that. But I think
yeah,
even that series, and I'll even say, I don't blame the Fox movies entirely. And they did make him kind of an unsavory individual, at least in the first couple of things where he was not
yeah,
the nicest guy.
yeah.
I think
I like that version of him.
I think what they've conflated is hero means likable. And I think that's a mistake. I think the thing is, hero means look, Wolverine ain't killing innocent people. Wolverine sees a kid in a burning building, he'll go save him. But he's not going to hand the kid a teddy bear after that and be like, "You go home and have a good day, young man." He's just going to throw the kid out of the fire, roll out, and go grab a beer. And
Yeah,
I think that's the thing they've tried to do is. And look, I'm not saying you can't portray him as heroic. I do think, and I want to give the artist, I think it was Jason Aaron who wrote it. And I don't like his run on Wolverine, but he did do this really cool issue where he and Spider Man meet at a bar to have a drink. And
yeah,
at the time, Logan was like an Avenger, an X-Man character. He was teaming with X-Force. And Spidey's like, "Why are you on all these teams?" And Logan was like, "I've done so many bad things. I just spent all my time trying to do something right because of
mhm.
how much dirt I've done in the past." And I thought that's a cool examination of
That's
the
a good moment.
character.
Yeah,
But my favorite thing of Wolverine, where I loved the character, and I think if I summed him up, I always loved, and I can't remember the guy who wrote the panel, but there was one X-Men comic where I think it was Kitty Pryde or someone was talking to him. And I'm like, why are you the guy who goes out and does all these things? Like, because he kills the enemies and stuff. And he looked at me and he goes, I do that stuff so people like you never have to. I'm the
Oh
one who
yeah,
goes
yeah.
and does the dirty job, the awful thing, the ultimate thing that because my soul can take it. I don't want you to be that. And I thought that's a great summation of that character. Instead, now I hate when Wolverine's like palling around with the Avengers. And like, oh, hey, look, all the heroes are here, and there's Logan. Like, it's cool for a second, but it's also one of those things that if you think about it for more than like a minute, it's like it's the same. When I read that
He
origin
would
comic
turn
the first time,
around. He would turn around and walk out of that room. He'd be like,
yeah, no, I,
I'll
I
see
love the
some of you
reaction of
later. Yeah.
I love the reaction of Wolverine sometimes where like they'll show up in their superhero costumes and posing and he's like, you guys look like a bunch of idiots. And he's
Yeah.
just there in a leather jacket. And again, he needs a costume. He's an X-Men. He's got some of the best costumes in comics. But I do miss that edge. And I wonder if other Wolverine fans feel the same as far as do you feel like the character's just been sanded down a bit too much? I think it's a Wolverine issue, but I also think it's a Red Hood issue, it's a Punisher issue, it's a Venom
Venom.
issue especially with Mary Jane as Venom. It's
Right.
it's
Right.
it's an issue across the board, and I think they've got to get back to you don't always have to like some. Look, Superman you should always like.
Yeah.
Spider-Man probably should always like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wolverine, you can risk Wolverine being a character that's like he's kind of a jerk and be
Yeah.
okay with the audience going with it. Be interested to see what folks think down below. As always, folks, let us know your guys' thoughts. Thank you for watching. God bless you guys. We'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.